Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shub, and together with my partner and co host Patric, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all.
Oh, check that out, man. Check that out. Finally, the intro changed and pretty much in time. Exactly. I mean, 2 years ago, Patrick, it's been 2 whole years. Somehow we've labored through this with Practical Nerds.
It's and what a labor it was. But no, not really, right? I mean, I hope you don't feel it that way. We always like to joke, but actually, it's not a joke.
Yeah.
We're logging in. We're deciding in a minute what to discuss. And that decision is based on, hey, what is actually something that is on your and my mind to discuss anyway? And then we just switch on the camera. I mean,
exactly.
So hopefully that is not a labor.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, it's been fun. I think a lot of times I find myself genuinely surprised and intrigued at how much we are able to discuss about topics in the spur of the moment, and like sometimes go very deep, sometimes stop at being shallow and also realize, oh my God, how much shallowness exists in the industry. And that itself creates a situation for a pause. And I think it's been tremendous. So I think kudos and congratulations to both you and me.
So this is episode number?
71. 71. Which is also, you know what makes it super cool? It's a prime number, dude.
Man.
It's like divine intervention.
It's yeah, exactly.
Or mathematical. The mathematical gods intervene to make sure the 2-year anniversary falls on a prime number.
Yes, because we had absolutely no control over the result here. So
Yes.
This must have been divine intervention.
Yes.
You know, it's you playing Russian roulette, getting shot, and claiming the gods. So
that's a surprisingly good segue, which is why I think I feel it's responsible to interrupt you right there, good sir, right there. So, for regular followers of Practical Nerds, you may know that our very first episode, which by the way was a live LinkedIn stream, right?
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah, was a live LinkedIn stream. A lot of it we had a slightly different format then, if you could call it a format. And there we talked about, I guess, our take on the incredible hype and buzz around AI. So we're rewinding back to May 2023. And if you remember, Patrick, I think that must have been close to or around the peak euphoria with VCs in backing LLMs, AI wrappers, these kinds of things. Not that hype has faded away yet. It still exists. But I think
I'm not sure it was peak euphoria. I mean, it felt peaky at the time, but
yes.
I mean, in hindsight, I don't think that was the peak at all.
Maybe it was, I think, relative to what came before it. It felt like there were a few months in 2023 when there was nothing else being backed.
That I agree with.
Yeah, nothing else being backed. Maybe it was the peak relative to utter silence in every other industry that was getting VC funding. And I think at that time we presented our take on AI and the hype around it. So if you're interested, go and check us out. So I guess in some ways it's poetic or maybe not so poetic that it took us 2 whole years to come back to discussing something similar, Patrick. So what are we talking about now?
Well, maybe after reviewing this episode, people will say, my God, these guys have become even more extreme in their convictions and their view of a subset of the AI market. So let me preempt that eventual feeling by just saying one thing. So Shub, you and I, we agreed during the pre-brief that we're going to play, let's say, a little bit cabaret today. The beauty of cabaret is that, is cabaret actually an English term? Because in German it means basically like political comedy.
I believe it's prevalent in English because I was familiar with the term.
Okay, so the beauty of that cabaret is that it leaves the audience to decide what they think is in jest and what they think is actual reality. And the medieval version of that is the court jester.
Yes.
Right? So the protected freedom of speech, but under the guise of, hey, I don't let you know what I really think. Right? So which is my position. And we're applying that court jestership / cabaret to the AI market today. What we see happening, we are going to bring a controversial perspective here, also in the metaphors that we're using as part of this cabaret. But I think it is thought-provoking, and everyone should listen to this, because there is, I think there's striking insight hidden in that perspective, and the impact on a subset of the AI companies that builds actual real stuff could be quite radical, and you better prepare for it today. That's why we decided to have this episode. So, Shub, you have to segue me here, because I think I am the first court jester.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I think you spoke about a setup where, on the topic of divine intervention, a setup where, all the sides or all the possible scenarios are controlled by the same person or the same set of entities, let's call it. And that's how you completely load the outcome decisively in one side's favor.
Yes.
Now, the reason I decided to immediately jump in and use that as a segue, and as you rightly pointed out in our pre-brief, Patrick, I can't think of something that completely fits that description today as the AI, let's call it the early to early growth stage AI VC market today.
Well, then I think you're wrong. So,
okay.
Shub, how often have you watched Ozark?
Twice.
So I'm currently on my second run. The first one was I was a relatively late comer to the Ozark hype.
Okay.
Because I don't like starting shows which don't have at least either reached full closure of all seasons, or have at least 5 seasons, because I like to binge.
Very smart.
So I came to Ozark 2 years ago, and so I'm currently on my second rerun, season 3, episode 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So by that time, the viewers have long figured out the very weird dynamics between the protagonists, etc. So, Shub, since you are a much better rememberer of details, why don't you tell me what is Ozark about? And then I'll add color and flavor to it and translate it into AI.
And I shouldn't be providing spoilers, I'm guessing. So I'll keep it at a high level.
Well, okay. Now, hold on. The spoilers. Sorry. If anyone still wants to watch Ozark and doesn't want to have spoilers, you need to log off now.
Okay. All right. So the story is about a family of which let's call it the head of the family, in terms of the outward facing role, is a very well-respected white-collar professional, providing financial advice and whatnot.
Finance professional, actually.
Correct. Like provides financial advice. If I'm not mistaken, actually investment advice, right? Right. And what we later find out is actually providing this investment advice to very dangerous people, drug lords and all these kinds of folks. And that's why his business is actually very profitable. But that is precisely the reason that it lands him in trouble through one of his partners who's been siphoning off money, so on and so forth. And then they escape into the Ozarks, which, as the show tells us, which I thought was fascinating, has a longer coastline than the state of California. Right?
Wow, that you remembered that detail from the first episode.
I thought it was a very cool factor, right? And the show basically describes the way life for them manifests in the Ozarks, and it's like one escalating situation after another, where basically it's a show about increasing levels of money laundering and political alignment.
You said it.
And this and that. And the stakes of the extent of money laundering and how deeply it pervades both the family and the extended, call it intersections that the family comes across with, it's quite shocking. By the third or fourth season, it's mind-bending, just the extent of money laundering that's going on.
Okay, so 2 pieces of context before I add a little bit of color. One, my wife used to work for many years in the anti-fraud department of Citigroup. And part of that was also identifying money laundering attempts among the accounts that the Citigroup oversaw. It was a combination of basically anti-fraud algorithms plus the human review and human interaction that my wife was a part of. Citigroup, obviously, highly professional organization, really well run on that part of the backend, because with the Basel regulations, etc., it became more and more and more important, more and more difficult also for money launderers. But there's always a way. 2, you are our chief compliance officer, actually, and as part of that, you have good choice, and you have mandated that the entire team has to do 1 anti-money laundering and compliance training every year, the entire fundamental team. The regulator in Germany appreciates that a lot about us, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. That doesn't make us experts in this subject. I'm about an expert as much as any other Ozark viewer. However, I will just point out, as part of that expertship that this court jester has acquired, the way it is portrayed to me, it seems that money laundering happens by one party having money that they cannot fully use. Okay, you have, let's say, 500 million somewhere, and for some reason you cannot directly bring it into your own pocket to use it.
Yes.
So you need to bring it into some system, funnel it through the system, and typically there's layers of entities that system represents. The entities could be natural people, but most of the times it has to be legal entities for the sheer scale of it.
Yes.
And then they need to control each entity in order to funnel back as large portion of that money to the original person in control. And by doing that, they lose some cut of it.
Yeah.
Because Marty in Ozark, he took a 3% cut?
I think so, yes.
Yeah. And then the other entities that you kind of control, but they're not in your visible ownership, like, for example, in Marty's case, external contractors that he agrees kickbacks with in the show.
Yes.
They give you money back, but they keep a cut for, whatever, the services provided, the risks taken, etc. But ultimately, you have just funneled the exact same money through multiple entities that ultimately you have control over. You lose some of it, and back you get money that now looks legitimate and it is usable for you.
Yeah.
Have I, in layman's terms, summarized the principle of Ozark?
100%. I think you've done it very well.
Yeah, in Ozark, they use a casino for it.
They use many businesses. Businesses.
That's true, but the thing that kind of saves their life at the end of season 1 and season 2 and season 3 is the promise of running the casino.
Yes.
Right? Beautiful metaphor for VC in many ways that this court jester wants to point out. So, Shub, do you want me to keep going, or do you want to interject on the metaphor that I'm trying to construct?
Go for it. I think you're setting us up very nicely.
It's the privilege of the court jester to paint pictures of the reality of the court. Okay. So now I want to move you, dear court, into modern AI investing among VCs. So Shub, what are we observing? Help me out here. We have VCs all over the media telling everyone that AI will transform everything except the job of the early stage investor.
Yes.
Google that. If you don't understand the reference, you will find it in 1 second. So the VC industry, especially, sorry, I no, here I want to be specific. The generalist VC industry is placating the entire channels that they have access to with AI is the most transformative thing ever. Okay, 1. 2, the same people who do that have accepted money from typically large institutions that make up the largest portion of the funds that they manage for them. And they are constantly in fundraising mode for managing even more funds.
Yes.
Okay. So now they manage these funds, point 3. They manage these funds. And unfortunately, the moment you bring these funds into a legitimate system, you really lose a lot of control over it. You're buying shares in founders. You don't own the founders. You don't own the competition. You don't own regulation. You have no idea how the political climate will change.
You don't have direct claims to be able to retrieve the cash or assets unless something dire happens.
Exactly, right? Yeah. That's why the term venture is in venture capital, because you are taking part in entrepreneurial risk, and that entrepreneurial risk exists because you don't control key parameters of your future success. Would you agree with that definition?
100%. Yeah.
So that's how it's supposed to be, right? Now, I am observing, though, point 4, how these funds are being invested in a large group of generic AI companies. By generic, that's not a judgmental term. That's a term that I use in order to say they are horizontal. They provide solutions not specifically to one sector. They exist too, and I will come to that because I think they are the victim here. But that's saved for a later part of the episode. So a lot of money is brought into generic AI startups. And you know what? These same investors don't do that with one AI startup. They don't take one bet on one horse and accept that venture risk, that horse will be the one that will win. They also don't do it with 10, Shub. They do it with literally hundreds.
Or I think what might be even more appropriate is they buy out the entire race.
Right? Okay. So now you're funneling money into a lot of legal entities. Okay. Now, you know when so I'm moving to point 5. These are the fund managers that are placating their distribution channels, media, social media, informal events, LP meetings with, oh my God, my portfolio company has grown in 10 months to, should give me a number that you have heard. How much ARR?
30 million ARR. Right? Yeah.
1 year, 20 million ARR.
Yeah.
All of that. And that is not, oh, okay, that was 2 companies whose investors claim that. Dozens, if not small number of hundreds of companies that have claimed that in the last maybe 1.5 years.
Yeah.
Right? So all of a sudden you have blown up the P&L of a legal entity. Sounds like a success, right? Go watch Ozark to see another example of that. Okay. Up until here, if this is where the court jester's observation would stop, you would say, hey, but that's terrific success. That's brilliant. It would be brilliant if the cash for purchasing the services of these companies were to come from entities that the same investors wouldn't control. I would agree with that. Like Fortune 500 enterprises in industrial sectors, because they have no affiliations to these investors, unless you think that BlackRock and the Norwegian Sovereign State Fund are part of this Ozark episode, which I don't think. But if you looked into these kinds of examples, I would bet a pretty dollar that a very large percentage of the ARR comes from whom, Shub? What do you think I'm going to say?
VC-backed startups?
Interesting, right? So when you look at, I'm not going to go names because the gesture is pointing out the principle, not about specific companies, but co-pilot this for apps, for example, websites, coding, etc. Who are their customers? Do you really think that's the corporate IT team? No, that's other founders. Who has backed these other founders? Who are the customer of this other AI copilot? The VC. What does this other company build? AI for sales. You know who's using the AI for sales? The AI copilot company.
Yeah.
Okay. So the whole industry of generic VCs that are placating the news with AI this, AI that, fastest to this much ARR ever, who have an incentive to raise more and more money because they are in for taking their cut of through management fees, have an incentive to manage more money. And for that, they directly benefit by inflating their books. What is the best way to inflate your books? Controlling both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
I think the viewers are getting the court gestures point here, but let me have your reaction.
I guess to play the other side, right? Or to play the role of someone outside this bubble, right? So what if someone were to say, hey, it's still beautiful, you've orchestrated all of this. You can just keep inflating both sides in a virtuous cycle. Why would that be a bad thing?
It's not arm's length, is it?
It is not arm's length. I would argue, can it also be inflated sustainably and reliably for an extended period of time?
Why do you not audit your own books?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes is the answer.
Okay. The investors of these funds, who are they? Through some layers, they are people who actually own pensions.
Yes.
Right? Why do they deserve to be part of a potential market where this cash is being funneled in a way that maximizes not their return necessarily, but that along the way where no money has been returned maximizes the vigorish of the money managers because they control both sides of the equation?
Yes.
I don't think that's fair at all. That's not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. I mean, look, you're right. I mean, it's the AUM game as it is referred to. It's the next...
Yes, but without risk.
Correct. I mean, without risk, until you can no longer inflate this demand from both sides. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting that you said that. What is the breaking point?
So look, at some point, one would imagine, we haven't reached that point yet, but I think the point may not be very far from where we are today. At some point, to continue this mutually inflating cycle, what you need is a continuing supply of money to both ends and both independently expanding in a way that is codependent. Right? Sorry, I used a ton of words here, so let me repeat to make sure we all understand. Both sides of this VC bubble are independently growing through access to more and more money, and they're both feeding off of each other in a codependent way. Right? Now, that has actually happened so far in the last 2.5 years, I would say. But to continue making it happen, you also need to assume that all of the other capital allocators behind these funds are okay with pushing it for the next 2, 3, 5 years without visibility to returns. Because what returns means is some player in the ecosystem cashes out, and then you can no longer participate in the money funneling game. If you're following what I'm saying.
100%.
Right? And history tells us, and by that I don't mean that history has to always repeat, but history tells us that there is a finite life to such sort of bubblish cycles where there needs to be a codependent inflation.
But I actually think this is worse than that. And that's why I'm using Ozark to paint a picture here.
Okay.
Great financial crash. 2008. Well documented what happened ultimately. Not exactly a documentary, but good entertaining summary is The Big Short. But many people will be familiar with the subject. Ultimately, that was better than what is going on in VCs in AI. This gesture will make that argument. Why? Because, as much as the mortgage-backed securities back then ultimately were growing into ridiculous proportions of, like they say, dog shit wrapped in cat shit. The other party that was purchasing the bundles of mortgage-backed securities that were subprime was not under your control. This was pure incompetence on the buyer part. It was malicious on the seller part. That was terrible.
Yes.
But it was not in let's say, the grand scheme of things, the way it has been documented. I'm sure there were exceptions. It was not a scheme where someone controlled both sides of the transaction. Again, I'm sure exceptions existed, but by and large, that was not the case. But Shub, that's what the court gesture is pointing out here. That is exactly what is happening in AI, and the circus ought to be running. And because I control both sides, and I have a platform to speak my mind, I can try to basically shave off as much money as I can by keeping the circus running.
So, since you brought up the casino reference early on,
where's the FBI in this? That is actually trying to catch Marty.
And since you brought up the casino reference earlier, no matter what happens, the house will win because the house will keep taking its rake each time in any case.
Chef's kiss. Perfect, Shub. Exactly right. Chef's kiss. Part of the Ozark metaphor that I want to point out is I think Ozark is actually, it's a surprisingly deeply layered metaphor for life. At some episode in, I believe it's season 2.
Okay.
And in hindsight, I thought, is that why the Byrdes called Byrd by last name? Jonah, the son of the family, so actually season 1, made the point of, hey, there's this invasive species of birds that basically kill off everyone in their vicinity, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I haven't had the reviews, but I always kind of assumed that's why they called the family the Byrdes, because everyone except 2 characters in the show that comes close to their life is killed off.
Yes.
Right? So the one exception is Ruth. Who's
Man,
the
now
other?
we're definitely going all deep in spoiler territory.
Fair warning here. Yeah. The brother dies.
Omar also dies.
Oh yeah, that's right. Even the cartel lord dies. Right?
I think the one lady, forgetting her name now, the one who actually was the original owner of the hotel.
Rachel.
Was it called the Blue? Yes.
Yeah, I think Rachel escaped. That's right. But her life got screwed too.
Yes.
Yeah. Brother died. Sorry, actually, brother didn't die. Brother was assassinated on order of the sister Byrd.
Yes. Was handed over to be pretty much executed. Yeah.
Who actually survived in their vicinity other than themselves?
Yeah.
Right?
Nice.
I mean, it goes even further. Like it's so funny, this show, right? In a way. So they are invading this new ecosystem, Osage Beach, Lake of the Ozarks. And you find out through the show, hey, there is an, what do you say? When a bird species is already there, what is the technical term for it?
Apex predator, you mean?
Exactly. There was an apex predator and it was domestic. Is that the term? There was already a species of birds who had control over the feed. This couple that grew opium and sold heroin and already laundered money in the businesses there. And then the birds come and they actually, initially without knowing, disrupt their little ecosystem by doing their thing, right? And eventually that couple, completely ruthless people, both are dead.
Yes.
Yeah. It's poetic. Okay. So this is the segue I wanted us to go in. So
by the way, it's a beautiful analogy that you set up. And for those of our audience who's familiar with the show, if you have understood the references to Ozark, it is frighteningly similar to the setup of the current AI ecosystem.
Seriously, once you see it, you cannot unsee it.
Yeah.
So here's the segue. Why should anyone fucking care about this court and its jester? Because if you're an AI company, but you're legit because you're marketing yourself as AI. You use it as a hook to get customers, and your customers are customers that are not VC backed. They are enterprises. They are large general contractors. They are AE companies. They are perhaps SMB contractors. Perhaps they are distributors. Perhaps they are machine manufacturers. You actually should not be considered part of this play. But when that music stops, when Marty is being made in this, when the whole system collapses, the fallout will not be able to differentiate between what was good AI and bad AI. The fallout will only say, oh my God, how could we ever back mortgage-backed securities? There were legit AAA mortgage-backed securities.
Yeah.
But they were downgraded too because it was very difficult for people to differentiate, and that needed real time. Yeah. So why you should care about that is if this court jesters, this cabaret's metaphor even plays out to a degree, there is a chance that you have to protect against brand fallout from this. So Shub, let's talk about that. If you were a founder in AI in construction tech that would not want to be considered part of this casino and the owners of the casino, what are the things you would do?
Look, I think first thing I would probably try to pick a niche or some sort of value proposition where I can, with reasonable authority, assert that I'm the only one of my kind, or the solution is very, very tailored in terms of relevance, in terms of clientele, in terms of the problem statement. Because why? Because that means you're not dependent on calling yourself, X for Y or X of Y, or you're not trying to replicate, you're not trying to be a better OpenAI or a better Perplexity or something of that sort. And it is more likely if you find a niche of that sort for yourself, that your fortunes and eventual success do not require you to be part of a certain clique or a certain circular ecosystem to eventually succeed.
So you would recommend start branding yourself as, I just happen to do it with AI, but here's the real outcome and the real value. And the customers are hard companies, hard businesses.
Yes. And they do business with me for certain very specific reasons, that may or may not be AI, but AI is just incidental to it. But they have their own specific reasons which can be articulated without bringing up AI.
It's so I've seen that perhaps the most famous accelerator in the world, whose name I will not mention, has allegedly, I'm part of a WhatsApp group. This is an allegation. I can't confirm it primarily. In their latest batch, advised every of the 200 odd companies that are in that batch, add an AI at the end of your name. Can you believe that?
That is insane, man.
Right? So,
by the way, this is just like the late 90s where you're setting up for a .com bubble. But anyway, yeah.
Diapers.com. That's right. But so you are saying, hey, go the opposite direction of that advice.
Look, it's easier said than done. So, for instance, since we brought up the .com bubble and burst, in general, when the bubble burst, it took down the .com companies the hardest, which also meant
thought of that.
Right? Which also took down the likes of Amazon.com. I don't remember the exact numbers, so feel free to correct me if you know the exact numbers. I think the Amazon stock price went down something like 95 or 96% during the .com burst. But it survived, right? Because it had its identity, while of course it was attached to being a .com, it was a .com attached to a more primary purpose, if that makes sense.
I would actually make the argument that Amazon benefited from the crash, even though it got affected a lot, because what did it wipe out? Competition.
Exactly.
What was Jeff Bezos' previous occupation again?
He was working at a hedge fund.
Really?
He was at a hedge fund. Yeah, DE Shaw.
Oh. Do you think he had friends at Wall Street?
Oof.
Maybe.
I don't know. If I had to take a guess, maybe. Yeah.
The cabaret is guessing. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so that's one advice. Yeah. If other ConTech startups would want to buy your solution, would you agree to it? Would you decline it? How would you play it?
I would go for it if I saw a very credible path where I can seriously take over that account in a way where I am not seen as a flavor of the season type solution. Where I can really get stuck in there for good.
And I would add, if it's a small portion of my revenue, I would have absolutely zero problems with it. So I think the problem always comes from two directions. One, when it's a very high proportion of your revenue. And again, do your research. You will come to this conclusion. Almost all of these inflated stories out there, you will find that 80, 90% or more of their revenue is with other VC-backed startups.
Yes.
And two, the other thing is, do you have SaaS-like gross margins? Or do you have negative gross margins or anything in between? Shub, I want to tell you a story from today, 4 hours ago. 100% happened exactly like that. I'm on the phone with a GP friend at a well-known firm. When I tell you the name, people will say, yep, that's one of the global names that you know. Okay. Firm invests anywhere from seed through Series F.
Okay.
So this GP and I, we chat about something adjacent to this conversation. And he said, dude, I looked at this deal 3 months ago, and they raised a huge round 3 months ago from this fund. The fund is one of the largest in the US and in Europe.
Okay.
For early stage founders, a name that would be considered in many circles top 10 worldwide. Okay. And I told him, yeah, I'd heard of the round. Sounds like one of these other, app builders, co-pilots that grows their ARR in the same way. And he said, yes, except their gross margin is minus 4%. I said, what? Because you and I, we've been talking about how OpenAI had negative gross margins on a documented basis from an observer.
Yes.
And it was mind-blowing to them. And now OpenAI claims to have 55% gross margins. So just for the record, that's what OpenAI is saying. So he's telling me, no, they have minus 4%, but 16 million ARR after a couple of months. I was like, how is that possible? How can you actually, he said, compute. It's just compute. So I said, hold on. So you have to tell me how that compute will scale. The cost of compute will scale with more use. He said, it doesn't. It's the whole promise of, everything will become more efficient. You know, I had a debate online with people who are within the AI casino that were pointing out, Patrick, you're not getting it. Everything will become more efficient. Sorry. I know which physicists to talk to, and the physicists are not AI founders in that casino. Yes, the models might get more efficient to perform the same task, but at the same time, they will make the models more complex to do more and more tasks. So on an absolute basis, the energy demand will not go down. Okay, so why would the gross margin improve if we're just doing more with more? It won't, because the willingness to pay will not go up accordingly.
Yeah.
You know who the customers of that company are? I asked the other GP.
Okay.
I said, exclusively other startups. Okay. All I need to know to prove this point anecdotally.
By the way, I mean, what
minus
relates
4%. Sorry, Shub. I'm not sure everybody realizes this instantly. The gross margin is revenue minus the cost you have to generate that revenue. This is not after overhead, sales, marketing, engineering. This is like you deliver a service and it will never make you money.
Yes.
Sorry.
I mean, for reference, I think the most recent, or maybe the episode just before that, was on the SaaS benchmarking that we did, where the companies we profiled were in the range of 78 to, I think, 91% gross margin.
Autodesk 91, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people are passing on marketplaces when they have 1% gross margin because that looks like a classifieds business. So this business has minus 4%. But no, let's pile in.
Yeah.
These people are not stupid. They know what they're doing. It's just not what you think it is.
Isn't it also interesting, Patrick? This overlays very nicely. I mean, in recent times, you observe businesses which otherwise have very nice aspects to them as, okay, in an oversimplified way, let's call them very well-positioned SaaS businesses. But then they at least claim that they're going to lean in hard in terms of AI and data compute capabilities. And they always project the gross margin decreasing. Isn't that interesting?
It's unexpectedly honest.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Says the jester.
Yes.
Interesting, no?
Yeah.
So why should anyone care? The point is, this carousel will stop. It will not go on forever. If you don't believe that, do your research. The party always stops, regardless of how loud the music is, regardless of how many people attend it, regardless of how expensive the venue is. The party has always stopped in history. At some point, someone won't have chairs at this party. And the best thing you can do is leave the venue before that happens. If you want to play real substantiated game, build businesses, you can also stay in the casino and make money. I'm not debating that. I'm debating whether it's ethical. Okay, that's one thing. And I'm debating whether that is the game that venture was born to play. The cabaret asks this question, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think that's not for you, then the best move that you can do as a construction tech AI company is to make sure you're not in the casino. You're not associated with the casino. You're not seen as the casino. You're not tainted from the casino fire that is about to happen at some point in time. I wanted, by the way, Shub, before we close this here, just the cabaret has one more observation. Have you noticed how the same fund managers all of a sudden like government roles?
Oh, I have seen that. Yes.
Interesting.
I think that's not by accident or a coincidence. I mean, when it comes to how do I phrase this? Let's call it generally accepted lobbying practices, right? So generally accepted lobbying practices are government and big corporate industrial leaders. It's like a revolving door of role switching and so on.
Oh, but that's lobbying. Taking a role in the administration is the next level there.
That is true. It has definitely leveled up. You're right. You're right. I mean, it's a reflection of the fact that the casino is leveling up. There's more and more money moving hands, and that's a reflection of hard power.
What was Wendy's previous job in Ozark?
Good question. I think earlier she did try to be like a fundraiser for a prior presidential campaign.
Yeah, so she was the campaign manager for Obama's second state campaign in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
So she's from politics. And then in season 2, when they want the casino license, what are they doing?
She went in, I guess, for lack of a better term, politicked with the local representative.
Yeah, with the lake house. That's right. Well, the cabaret thinks it's an interesting metaphor for life.
Yes.
What is going on. But the cabaret also thinks it's worth for the founders in construction tech that associate themselves with AI to consider what to do about their company, right? And so that's something I just want to point out. Not everything we mentioned here is our opinion. Some things might be, some things might not be. We'll leave that obscure.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
So episode 71, prime numbers, back to the roots, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure doing this with you, Patrick. Many more episodes and years to come.
Likewise, sir. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah.
Cheers.